Could the Angels unload the Anthony Rendon contract for a quality major leaguer? Johnny, should the Angels unload the Anthony Rendon contract for a quality major leaguer? You and I decided that we're going to play GM with the baseball trade simulator, and we're going to attempt to try and trade Anthony Rendon. Reasonable, logical trades, not crazy trades. And we've got all the details of what we came up with today. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all this wonderful Halo content, then here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started.
Happy Monday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, it's our second off-season here with you at Locked On Angels, and the winter meetings are in full swing, and we're here waiting for any breaking news that might have to do with our Angels, or even might not, Mike. I think as we got started, am I saying Kelenic to the Braves? Jared Kelenic to the Braves?
Okay.
That might be a thing. Obviously, this will come out tomorrow morning and people will see this, but I'm kind of just finding this out right now. Oh yeah, Jared Kelenic to the Braves. There you go. Right. Interesting. So yeah, hot stove baby is starting to heat up. And again, if there's any Angels related news, that's kind of Angels adjacent, right? Then he's not in the AL West anymore, right?
Right.
We'll be here for you covering that. And next week we are going to be dropping down to 3 episodes a week. We'll probably stick to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, but we'll have some small short form content in between those episodes as well to keep you going with us here on Locked On Angels. Mike, on today's show, everybody wants to trade Anthony Rendon. So we thought, hey, we're going to throw our hat into the ring and see if we can get it done and try to see if it's even feasible. So we did try to use the baseball trade values tool. Obviously, it's helpful in that regard. Not always like super accurate because it doesn't take in like real world situations, but it does give you like a nice score, right? Before we get started with that, I think it's important to go back in time and have a little history lesson here. So what you and I have done is we put together 3 examples of these kinds of trades where a team is trying to offload a large contract of somebody that they might not want around anymore. And the first example of this trade, Mike, is what I like to call a compromise. And here is where we're going with this one. Robinson Cano signed a 10-year, $240 million deal with the Mariners back on December 6, 2013. Now, over those 5 years that he played for them, 2014 to 2018, 3 All-Star selections, 296 average, of 129 OPS plus. And then we found out he got suspended for PEDs. So there's your there's your answer for the great stats there. Mike, he got busted again in 2020 and didn't play with the Mets in 2021. I totally forgot about that.
Me too.
So on December 3rd of 2018, he was traded to the Mets with Edwin Diaz. You know him, that rock star closer for the Mets with the trumpet and everything. Now, he did get hurt in the WBC, but the Mariners sent Cano and Diaz to the Mets and $20 million. And in return, Mike, they got Jay Bruce, Anthony Swarzak, Jared Kelenic, who just got traded. That's fine.
Wow. Okay.
Justin Dunn and Gerson Bautista. Jay Bruce was making $13 million and just came off a bad year with the Mets. Swarzak was owed $8.5 million, and he was not a great reliever at this point. Then the Mets sent 2 first-round picks and a fringe reliever. So what was the result here? Seattle wanted out of Cano's contract. They took on another bad contract in Jay Bruce and Swarzak, plus they paid $20 million. Then they traded Edwin Diaz, coming off of 2018, where he led the league in saves and had a 1.96 ERA.
Wow.
Obviously, he got that big contract with the Mets, so he's a valuable closer. They did benefit from receiving the 2 first rounders. Now, the cost to the Mariners was this: $20 million, $4 million over 5 years. They took on $21.5 million in Bruce and Swarzak and their bad contracts. And then they gave up Edwin Diaz.
Wow.
So to me, this was a compromise that both teams had to make. But, one side gave up some considerable money and the other side gave up some considerable players. So to me, Mike, that first trade example of the Mariners trying to get rid of Robinson Cano is an example of a compromise. Why don't you talk about example trade number 2?
The example number 2 is the pay to play somewhere else.
Yes.
And so we're going to use a name that all Angel fans know. That's Vernon Wells. And he was owed $21 million for the 2013 and 2014 season. The Angels traded him for 2 minor leaguers who never made it to the majors, Johnny.
Sounds about right.
Right. Most of his contract was covered by the Angels. The 2013 portion, the Angels paid almost $10 million, $9.5 million. The Yankees paid $11.5 million. And then in 2014, the Angels paid $18.6 million. And the Yankees paid $2.4 million. Angels paid.
He didn't even play in 2014 either. 2013 was his last year.
That's a nice gig, huh? If you can get it. Angels paid almost $30 million of the remaining $42 million, 28.1 to be exact. That was 67% of the remaining contract. Johnny, this is the classic paying a player to play somewhere else because we're tired of you, right? That's this kind of move. And the Angels covered 2/3 of the remaining salary. We've seen them do this with Upton. We've seen them do this with Albert Pujols, although they only had league minimum costs covered since they were released by the Angels. So that's example number 2.
They ate most of those remaining years on Pujols and Upton. Now, it was just 1 year.
Yeah.
But it was enough for them to say bye-bye.
Yeah.
Mike, this third trade example I like to call trash and treasure, because we'll take your trash if it means we get some of your treasure. And a lot of people, especially recent Angel fans, are familiar with this trade. Zach Cozart, Mike. He signed a 3-year, $38 million deal before the 2018 season.
Yep.
And he had 1 year left on his contract, $12.7 million. And they traded him to the Giants. The Giants paid for that last year. The Angels traded Cozart and their number 1 pick from 2019, Will Wilson, for cash and a reliever. Cozart didn't even play in 2020. The Giants released him. So essentially what this boils down to is the Giants just wanted the Angels' number 1 pick, and they were willing to pay the cost of 1 year of Cozart to get him. And now here's the thing about Will Wilson. He's been fine, like a middling prospect, but it was a valuable get at the time because they had just got him back in June. So, who knew what could have happened with Will Wilson? And to be honest, I believe that Wilson not panning out probably has more to do with the Giants system, unless he just wasn't a good prospect to begin with.
Sure.
But the Giants are the one who have developed him all this time. And so it's kind of on them. But the point being is that they paid $12.7 million for a draft pick they really wanted, and they didn't have any plans for Cozart anyway. So, Mike, before we continue our conversation on today's episode and we get into my ideas and your ideas, let's just remind everybody of this. Anthony Rendon is owed $38 million a year for the next 3 years, 24, 25, and 2026. That adds up to $114 million each year. Now, because of the way the contract is structured, he is owed $38 million on the payroll, but the money that goes toward the luxury tax, which is probably the most important part here, is $35 million. So for the next 3 years, $35 million goes toward the luxury tax for the cost of Rendon. So that's kind of where we're at. Those are 3 examples of the kinds of trades that have been done to salary dump in the past. And I think that's the kind of trades that is going to have to happen if the Angels want to get rid of Rendon, don't you think?
Well, they're the experts, Johnny. They did it with Cozart and they did it with Vernon Wells.
Yeah,
And
they could pull it off.
unfortunately, we give 3 examples, and the Angels did 2/3 of those examples.
Yes, right.
And unfortunately, the Angels have gotten themselves into a bit of a pickle with contracts in the past. And so this is something that they've done in the past. They have a history of doing this. And the question is, can they do this with Anthony Rendon? And so we're going to spend some time talking that through and giving you some real life trade scenarios using the trade simulator. And I think I'm really excited to share with you what I came up with. Not that I'm thrilled about it, John,
Right.
but I'm excited. Like, I think that there's some options out there. One I think will be like, okay. And the other one it might be a bit painful. So I can't wait to share that with you.
All right. Hey, we're just getting started here on Locked On Angels, and we appreciate you making us your first listen every single day. Coming up on Locked On Angels, Mike and I are going to share the trade ideas that we came up with to try and get rid of Anthony Rendon. We'll leave it up to you guys to determine if they're any good at all. And we'll also get into some of your examples later on in the show. So stick with us, and we'll talk about all of that coming right up.
Johnny, I hope that you used FanDuel this last weekend, because we were talking about our boys, the 49ers.
That's right.
Playing the Eagles, and everybody said it's going to be a really close game. Turns out, wasn't close at all, was it?
Funny what happens when the other team doesn't injure your quarterback in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Right. How about that 42-19 score or something along those lines? Amazing. And if you used FanDuel and you bet on the Niners, you could have won big. FanDuel's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. A money line bet that if you put down on the Niners, you could have won $150. That's $150 if your team wins. And so if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, now's the best time to do that. The app is really easy to use, wide range of betting options like spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And we've said on the show, if you have no idea what you're doing, FanDuel has a great explanation tool on their app that tells you exactly what each of these things mean: spreads, player props, over-unders, all that. So check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can participate in the NFL season in more ways than one. And FanDuel is the official betting partner of the NFL.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Don't forget, everybody, that Locked On Podcast Network has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today. Head over there on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, click the live tab, and you can get in on all the action 24/7, 365, covering all the top sports stories from every single league with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows that cover Locked On NBA, Locked On MLB, Locked On NFL. It's all there for you. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel.
So John and I decided to try to trade Anthony Rendon and trade his contract to another team. John followed a really interesting rhythm, an interesting premise with compromise, pay to play, those types of things. John, we haven't looked at these things until we hit record on this episode.
Right.
And I'm noticing that your first trade is my first trade.
That's
so spoiler alert, what John talks about in this next segment, the first thing he talks about, you'll hear again in my segment. But I do, as I'm reading through your notes, we do have some different thoughts. So why don't you give us the first trade, a trade that you would say is a compromise?
I think this is a compromise, Mike, in the vein of the Robinson Cano trade involving a lot less players, because for me, this is a 1-for-1. Anthony Rendon for Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
It's a bad contract for a bad contract, Michael. And here's the thing. Both of these guys have no trade clauses. So we're doing this episode. It might be null and void at this point, because neither of these guys want to be traded. But here's why I decided to go with Rendon for Stanton. Stanton is guaranteed $118 million, but the Marlins are paying $10 million in 26 and 27. And I think they'll even pay for the buyout in 28. So this means that rather than doing that, the Angels would pay $98 million until 2027. He has a club option for 2028. Again, a $10 million buyout, but it sounds like the Marlins would pay for that. Now, here's the kicker. And this is important. So everybody lean in, Michael. Stanton's luxury tax salary, the amount of money that goes toward the luxury tax threshold is $22 million.
Yeah.
While Rendon's is $35 million.
Wow.
So the Yankees have shown that they are willing to go above the luxury tax. But here's why I'm doing this. Here's the compromise. For the Yankees, they get out of a bad contract 1 year sooner with Rendon because Rendon is done after 26. Stanton is done after 27. Now, Rendon, as much as he hasn't been able to play for us, the Yankees could actually use him at third base because they've been using LeMahieu over there. They've been using Josh Donaldson, who's not on the team anymore, and then Oswaldo Peraza as well, but he can also play the middle infield. They might want to try him out there. He's somebody that they're looking at to see if he'll develop well. For the Angels, they save $13 million towards the luxury tax each year. So again, that's Rendon's $35 million versus Stanton's $22 million. So that's the kicker here. Now, I know everybody says, and including was it Brian Cashman who said Stanton's injured all the time and all this stuff?
Yes.
So despite that, and despite Stanton's injuries, he's still played 100 games or more each season since 2021. So he's out there. He's just DHing most of the time, but he has 1 more year and a $10 million buyout. But again, I think the reduction in the luxury tax salary and then even having him DH is still really helpful because he averages 30 home runs and 78 RBIs a season since.
Okay. I like what you did here. I'm going to save my thoughts for the next segment because I have the exact same trade that I'll talk through. So let me save that and then give me your second trade option, your second trade scenario.
Okay, I did the pay to play somewhere else trade scenario. So
get out of here.
Anthony Rendon to the Texas Rangers. Now, how would this work? Well, Rendon is from Texas, so you probably have a better chance of an approval for the trade there if you wanted to go back home. Based on the Vernon Wells trade, Mike, the Angels would have to cover about 67% of that salary. And honestly, that's just an estimate. They might cover more. Yeah. But 67% of Rendon's remaining salary is $76.4 million. So that's a lot. Now, the Rangers, they've got money, and they've proven that they've got money, and they would be able to handle that remaining 33%. Now, would Texas want to take this on? I'm not so sure because they do have Josh Young over there at third base. Yeah. But they were rolling with Mitch Garver as a DH. So if they wanted to give Rendon some DH time or Josh Young off of his feet and use that as the DH, basically they need another bat. Maybe Rendon could be that other bat. But also, are they down for the gut punch of, hey, we got your guy and look how good he's doing here in Texas, Angels? You know what I'm saying? So that might be some incentive, but I didn't do a return for the Angels because, in all honesty, I'm sure it would be some kind of throwaway, minor leaguer, kind of guy coming back from the Rangers.
Man, to go to the Rangers and to play third base for them, or at least be in that lineup, and then be productive, would be so hard to see. And everybody, and I think a lot of Angel fans would go, "Of course,
that's
of course
exactly what would happen,
right?"
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mike. My third trade is the trash and treasure. We're trading to get your trash and your treasure. Okay. Now here's my trade proposal: Anthony Rendon, Reed Detmers.
I already hate it.
And I know. Reed Detmers and Patrick Sandoval to the Padres for right-handed pitcher Victor Lizarraga. Okay. Baseball trade value says that this would actually be a fair trade. Wow. The Padres have Manny Machado, but they will need a DH. They were rolling with like Matt Carpenter this year. So Rendon and Machado can swap between DH and third base, perhaps. The Padres need ready now pitching at a very low cost because they took out a loan to cover the team salary. So they have some really bad budget concerns. So they need some starting pitching that they can afford that's really cheap. And that would get this done here. Here's the thing, though. That probably means the Angels would also need to pay down some of Rendon's salary. If they did do that, that might actually net them back a better prospect. I think Lizarraga was like 15 in their system. Dylan Leschko, their number 1 pick from 2022, he's a right-handed pitcher in high A, and he's estimated to arrive in 2027. So the Angels could trade Rendon and their 2 starting pitchers to the Padres to get this done.
Interesting. So, Johnny, out of those 3 trades, which one would you say I would do this one?
Okay, if I had to choose to do one, the one that makes the most sense to me is the Stanton trade, considering it does reduce the money going toward the luxury tax. Yes, it is a year longer, but it's cheaper than Rendon. It would get the Angels or the Yankees out of their bad contract a year sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Paying the Rangers to take on Rendon doesn't seem any more valuable to me than just keeping him and hoping that he plays better, honestly, Mike.
Yeah.
And then finally, I'm not trading Detmers and Sandoval just because I don't want Rendon on the team anymore.
You're my favorite brother again. Go ahead.
Well, but that's the whole thing about this scenario is these are the things that you have to do.
You have to do it. Yep. Logical, reasonable. Yep.
If you don't want Rendon on the team anymore. So we're trying to be as realistic as we can be.
Yeah.
I don't have the same urgency as other fans to see Rendon be traded because everyone comes on and says, trade Rendon. That actually doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to get a good deal for Rendon, you're not. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And the other thing is, this took a lot of work. And so to just spout off, trade Rendon, well, you know what? Then you find the team that matches the Angels' need. You find the team that the Angels can help with and provide players with. You find a team that can take on his salary. And you find a team that Rendon would even want to go to because he has a no trade clause. So I am not in the camp of we got to get rid of Rendon, because there's no trade scenario out there that's going to be good enough for the Angels fan base. And quite frankly, for the other team who's taking on Rendon as well.
Johnny, got a new sponsor for Locked On Angels, and
yes,
it's a local sponsor. It's Logix Credit Union. So we give you a lot of in-depth analysis and hot takes here on Locked On Angels. Let me give you my hottest take of the day. You ready for this?
Hit
the
me.
Lineup in the LA area right now is the lineup of auto loans from Logix. They start off the top of the lineup with my favorites, the proven and dependable new and used vehicle loans. You can count on these guys to give you low rates and save you big time bucks. And we need that in this economy, right? We need that desperately. Next up, they've got an exciting new rookie sensation in their electric vehicle loans with super low rates and flexible payment terms, which is what everybody wants. And then to get an electrical vehicle, that's kind of fun, right?
Right.
I don't know if you saw the new truck that was out with Elon Musk and all of that. And they were kicking on the sides and they were driving and towing like a Porsche behind it. And they're really trying to show off, make it look awesome. So maybe you're excited about that and you want to get an electric vehicle. Well, Logix can help you. And then rounding out their lineup, they've got their auto refinancing loans and lease buyout loans. And with these guys, you could lower your monthly payments, which is great. And you can get on the road to owning your car a whole lot faster. Look, I know we share a lot of hot takes. I know this is a hot take, but let me be very serious with you. No one can beat the lineup at Logix. You can visit your local Logix branch right in the LA area and let one of their amazing team members help you, or you can apply online in just minutes at logixbanking.com. That's LOGIX banking.com.
All right, Mike, it's time for your trade ideas. So I know that we have an overlap here. So hit me with that first one.
I'm going to do Rendon for Giancarlo Stanton, and you shared some of the numbers. So I'm going to move quickly past those numbers. And I looked at the stats, Johnny, and I know that with Rendon, dude hadn't played a lot of games. And I know that there's that question about Stanton and is he going to be able to play some games? And as you mentioned, he's averaging 30 home runs and 79 RBIs. The concern I would have is his OPS has really dropped in the last 3 years. But a part of that has been the injuries that he has struggled with. So I actually put down positives and negatives. So here's some positives in my mind about having this trade take place. Remember, they both have to say yes to it. And so, but if they both say yes to this, Stanton coming to the Angels will be a power threat for the Halos. And if they don't re-sign Shohei Ohtani, this could be a move that could give them some extra pop in that lineup, maybe an extra 20 to 30 home runs, because they're not going to have Ohtani's 30 to 40 home runs in that lineup. And so I think in a right-handed batter that could really balance out a guy like Shawnuel and some other guys that are in that lineup, I think would be really beneficial. Rendon, Johnny, hasn't shown the ability to hit for power in the last 2 seasons when he's played. He's really struggled to even hit into the gaps. He had a lot of singles and wasn't really hitting the ball very hard.
When he hits the ball hard, it goes right at somebody too. Yeah. That was the big frustrating thing at the beginning of last season was is the power there or is he just bad luck,
Right.
BABIP'd. He's getting
Right.
BABIP'd to death, Mike.
Yeah. Now, Stanton can play outfield, as you mentioned. He also can be a DH for the Angels. And I think a trade and getting Rendon off this team can open up third base for a move for like a Candelario, or maybe if the Angels want to give Rengifo a shot at playing full-time, he can certainly play full-time there. Stanton definitely seems like he needs a change of scenery. However, it doesn't sound like they want to move him, at least initially. Now, you mentioned Brian Cashman saying, oh, he's going to wind up getting hurt all the time. Cashman had to clarify those comments a week later, by the way. And he said, without a doubt, Stanton is one of the big drivers when we win. He's one of the few players you bring to the New York Yankees that hasn't backed down, and he's handled himself in a professional manner through thick and thin. I would say that that's a positive as well, because Anthony Rendon has not handled himself really well, and Stanton has through some of the issues and some of the tensions that he has faced, especially when it comes to his body. Rendon's got some strange antics off the field and even on the field. And so to get that off your team, I think would be a benefit. And then you mentioned that the AAV for Stanton, especially against the luxury tax, is going to be a lot cheaper than Rendon. So those are some of the positives. Here's some of the negatives. You might be trading an inconsistent player for another inconsistent player, right? That's the risk you're taking. There is that extra year that you mentioned with Stanton. And quite honestly, like, do you want to take on that extra year and pay a big chunk of money? So, Johnny, am I missing anything here based off what you shared and what I've shared? Is there any thoughts here that you mentioned that this would probably be the trade that you would do after some of the points that I made? Would you still do this trade?
Well, like you said, him being a threat at the plate is always true. Like, you're always afraid to give Stanton a pitch to hit. So I could see him doing really well in a lineup with Mike Trout and the rest of the guys. So I mean, that is the positive there. And again, Mike, I go back to the fact that he costs less toward the luxury tax. I think that's super crucial, again, especially for this Angels team who's proven that they don't want to go over the luxury tax as well. Right.
So my second trade, Johnny, is one that is different than your second trade.
Okay.
And I'm going to start by paying 65% of Rendon's remaining salary.
Woo!
It's a lot. But then I'm going to trade him to the Jays.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm paying down 65% of the salary is that it would get his AAV to about $12.25 million a year, which is just under what the Blue Jays were paying Matt Chapman, who is a free agent.
Okay.
So I would trade Rendon. I would pay down 65% of his contract. And then according to the trade simulator, I would have to throw in Rengifo or Ward in that trade. I would have to throw in one of those guys. In fact, it would go through 1,000% if I put in both of those guys. It would need more, is what the trade simulator said, if I only threw in one of those guys. And who I'm trading for is George Springer.
Okay.
Now, George Springer has 3 years and $72 million left on his deal. He has some declining production. His OPS has gone down every single year. But here's some positives. His drop-off isn't dramatic. Still hits for power, and he's got positive defensive metrics at all of the outfield spots.
Okay.
The negative is Ward's gone, Rengifo's gone. Maybe some Angel fans aren't too upset about that.
Sure.
It does hurt some of our depth, and we still have a 3-year big money deal on the books. So what do you think about that trade?
You know, I honestly like the fact that you're not getting rid of somebody like Detmers or Sandoval or Silseth. There's a world where like Ward and Rengifo could be traded in like a good trade. Not that this is like the worst trade in the world, but it's not a trade I would want to give them up for.
Sure.
So I think that those guys are expendable, you know? Sure. So this isn't the worst trade in the world, but you're right. It's still a big money deal.
Yeah.
And people are still going to be frustrated with Springer's output. Maybe they won't be as frustrated as they have been with Rendon, but at the end of the day, it's who do you want to pay? Who do you want to pay to be on this team? Because you're going to have to pay a lot of money, and a lot of money still going toward the luxury tax. And the goal here, Mike, is do we want these contracts off the books so that we can pay for other free agents? I think that's the biggest thing that people want in moving Rendon. I don't want to gloss over that point, but the fact is it's really hard to even make a move without you still paying money toward Rendon and paying toward the luxury tax.
Yeah. Now, we did have some Locked On Everydayers that shared some ideas. So quickly, let me share those with you, Johnny.
Okay.
First, at 11 Less Dune suggested this trade: Rendon, Ward, and Canning to the White Sox for Benintendi and Moncada. And the trade simulator says this is a fair trade proposal. So would you do this?
I could see the Angels doing this. Would I do this? Yeah. If I really wanted Rendon off this team, I think I would make that move.
Yeah. Even giving up Canning, huh?
Yeah, I think starting pitching, there's a world where the Angels add another starting pitcher this offseason, and so somebody's going to be the odd man out there.
Yeah. And then at Big Scoons said
DeSclafani.
Thank you. I keep wanting to say Del Fiscani. DeSclafani, he's on the Giants.
Yes.
And who do a straight up trade for Rendon, and the trade simulator laughed at me. It said this trade was rejected because it just wouldn't work.
No, DeSclafani's only got 1 year left. I know he's not been great for the Giants, but I don't see this happening.
Yeah. And then the last one, John, is from at Van Awesome, and it said, I'll trade Rendon for a hand sandwich and a punch in the crotch. What do you think? This trade was accepted, by the way.
yeah, I bet. How much does that punch to the crotch take off of Rendon's salary, right?
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. Last thought, Johnny, should they trade Rendon?
No, just stick it out. You're going to be fine. They're going to be able to make it through. I would rather him have a turnaround with the Angels than to lose some players that we really like in order to get him off this team. But like I said, I know everybody wants him gone. Well, then you tell us what you think. Yeah, because this is really hard.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. And remember, every dayers, Locked On's launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today, and it's covering all of the top sports stories with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. You can go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel.
All right, friends, give us a follow at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, find today's episode, and comment below the video. Let us know your suggestions. I know you probably got a lot more than the ones we were able to share here, and maybe you're on board with some of the ones that Mike and I made. Maybe you think it's ridiculous. Maybe we just don't trade Rendon at all. What do you guys think? We'd love to hear from you. Hey, Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Well, the GM meetings are now in full effect, and so we're going to have breaking news updates for you, but we're going to talk specifically about who the Angels have been rumored to sign. They've been rumored to sign 3 specific pitchers: Blake Snell, Corbin Burns, Dylan Cease. So who would be the best fit, and should they go after any of those guys? We'll talk about that tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
Yeah, they got some free agent options and some trade options there, so it'll be interesting to see what the Angels do, which market they want to be a part of. All right, friends, thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels. Until tomorrow's show, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
My name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
All right, we appreciate you being here again. Make sure you get in our comments, get in on the conversation, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
A ham sandwich and a swift kick to the groin.